Welcome to the NLP Revealed podcast, connecting your business brain with the real world. Brought to you by NLP Superfest and Fridge Magazine. And now we join your host, Aaron Mawson.
I'm here with Alistair Horscroft, and Alistair is an author, advisor, and entrepreneur. He is seen as one of the top leadership coaches in the world and creator of the Mind Academy, where he teaches a number of courses, including NLP, hypnosis, and coaching. In his talk at the Superfest, you'll learn about how to superhero your life. So today, welcome, Alistair.
Thanks so much, Aaron. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Can you give a brief overview of how you would describe your work and the types of people that you commonly work with?
Yeah, sure. I mean, things evolve, over time, but I've always been in the area of, I suppose, optimal performance, both on the individual level and on the business level. So anywhere where I can engage kind of human behavior change to assist in a high performance life. That's what I do.
I listened to your talk on a TEDx, and
Yes.
And you were saying that you spent some time working with people with phobias in the zoo. That must have been quite an interesting experience.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I mean that seems like a bit of another lifetime ago now. I mean, I had a Discovery Channel TV show that was in the same area as well, working with people who were suffering from anxiety disorders and phobias and that kind of stuff. And that was a good kind of episode in my life because it demonstrated rapid change in a very visual format.
Right.
So you would have people who were kind of incapacitated in their lives, due to fear, and then in a very short period of time, we could get them to resolve that fear, and go on and experience more freedom. So that was a really enjoyable kind of venture for a number of years there. These days, I mean, still, whenever you're working with someone, whether it be individually or in business, I mean, a lot of the time the hurdle is fear. So I suppose even now in what I do, you're still, I suppose, either directly or indirectly helping people overcome their fear hurdles, within themselves. So that still kind of holds true, I suppose. And, kind of currently I've worked with, I've got a number of companies and businesses, but, and most of my work is, I suppose, larger scale now. But I still work with, I worked with a Premier League football player and, a pro triathlete, and, people kind of call and, you get them over their fear hurdles and into that kind of optimal performance mindset. And that's rewarding. And the same it is with teams in the corporate world. You're kind of, I suppose, modeling out best performers and then finding out, what's, in NLP, we're very fond of saying, what's the difference that makes the difference? And then, applying those ideas and concepts to, the teams and corporate strategies at large. So, there's always a central theme to Aaron, of what I do, but it's amazing at how many contexts you can spread it to.
And you always keep yourself busy by the sounds of it.
Yeah. I love to be busy. I think a life's to be lived. And keeping yourself busy and engaged, and doing projects that you love and working with people who are at the kind of cutting edge of life. I mean, why wouldn't you want to be there?
Obviously, you're presenting at the NLP Superfest. And how would you define NLP?
Yeah, I mean, NLP. It's been an extraordinary thing, in my life. Really, it transformed my life, and I think, obviously, if you define it by its, initial terms, it's the modeling of excellence, which I suppose if you were to kind of upgrade that to 2014, it's the modeling of high performance. It's working out what works and doing more of that. And I think that's what NLP really is defining and investigating and modeling out what works, so that you can replicate that. And I suppose it's not really about creating shortcuts per se. It's about being efficient, and being more efficient in your ability to get from A to B in the most effective and extraordinary way. But I think that NLP defined really is that, on one level, is the study of how to. A lot of people ask the question why. People become consumed with, why did this happen? Why did that happen to me? Why am I like this? Why is my business not succeeding? And in NLP, we're a little bit more into how. How can I get my business to succeed? How do I do what I need to do? And I think that's certainly for me was a massive shift in my thinking from being consumed from the why question and being able to refocus my life into the how question. So I think that's what defines NLP for me, is asking the question how.
So your definition of it is very much an action orientated approach. It's very much, this is how you do something rather than thinking about why something is so. We're looking at how something can be so.
I think that's exactly right, Aaron. It's like, say, for example, when you you can apply that to anything from a business process to an anxiety sufferer. If someone comes to see you and they're suffering from anxiety, my question is, well, how are they doing their anxiety? Much more so than why are they doing their anxiety? Yes, in some cases there might be an event, an event that caused their anxiety, but a lot of people know why they have things. When it comes to phobias, people used to know their Latin name for their phobias, but they still couldn't bloody get over it. And so, asking how they're doing it and what do I need to do to get them to stop it, or to transform it into something else, is often, far more useful. The why question has its place. It can be a question to define, the importance of something or the relevance of something. But I think, to be successful, keeping your eye on the how, and as you rightfully have identified, on the action steps required, is a far more efficient way of getting you where you want to go.
And what can the skills of NLP bring to an individual in business? If someone was well versed in the use of NLP, what could you expect someone to be able to do efficiently within business?
Well, I think on one level, in NLP, we talk a lot about kind of what we call unconscious competence, which is being able to take a skill and translate that skill from no longer being a kind of like a conscious idea or something you have to kind of willfully work at, and rather it becomes an automatic part of your behavioral skill set. Yeah. And I think that's a very important thing. I think you kind of, to be able to, how do I best explain it? But to be able to have an innate knowing that you can do something without keep on having to make yourself do that thing. It happens automatically for you. And this is a very powerful thing to be able to kind of experience for yourself. But there are kind of two levels of NLP modeling, one we call conscious modeling and the other we call unconscious modeling. And conscious modeling is, as I said, identifying. You could go into a business and like I said, model out the kind of key processes, ideas, concepts, and then you could replicate those in a very conscious way. And that can be a very useful thing to do. Unconscious modeling is more the absorption of the entirety, or what we call the gestalt, of a thing or of a movement or of a behavior or of a belief. And you kind of take it on without any kind of conscious filter per se, so that it's absorbed in its entirety. And when you can do that, you have kind of a greater access to the rapidity of the skill or the belief uptake. And so that's a very interesting area that I've spent many years enjoying and certainly doing for myself.
And I guess in relation to modelling, if a person is more versed in NLP, they would be able to look at examples of excellence and highlight that. People that are good at something and someone that is excellent at something. If you can model someone, you might as well model someone that's someone that's really excellent. And I guess the skills of NLP can help someone identify that.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, if you're going to bother doing something, you might as well at least find someone who's worth pursuing what their idea is. But I think there is a critical error that is made in a lot of NLP, and I think a lot of people make the mistake. And that is NLP. You meet some extraordinary human beings. Obviously, you could see Tony Robbins, Richard Bandler, all these kind of guys. And I think a lot of people make the mistake of modeling the personality of these guys, and that's where it becomes undone. As much as they're lovely, these guys, in my worst nightmare, I wouldn't want to be Tony Robbins or Richard Bandler. However, I'm very keen to be able to do some of the things that Richard and Tony can do. Yes. And so, a good NLP is very much themselves, and they want to be a full expression of who they are and their own unique personality, but they're able to replicate the skills of extraordinary people. And I think this is a very important distinction, and one that's lost on a lot of people. Everyone tries to run around becoming a mini Tony or a mini Richard, and they end up just getting fucked up. much more useful to keep your own personality, maximize your own strengths, and, as I said, replicate the skills of successful people.
Okay, and in your talk at the Superfest, the title is "Superhero Your Life." So, where did the idea of the superhero come from? Is this taking on some of the things that you said there, that you're trying to be yourself, you're not trying to be anyone else, you're trying to take the skills of someone else, but not necessarily the personality of the other person?
Yeah, I really think that's right, mate. I really think that's true. I think people, the further they move away from who they are, the more unhappy they become. You're born as you, and you have genetic-based strengths that you're going to want to maximize, and you maximize them to your advantage. You have to, as we know, manage your weaknesses. But we also have values-based strengths that we learn over our life about what's most important to us and how to action those. But yeah, the superhero your life, it was a kind of like a fun take. I've always been a fan of superheroes because they tend to take the classic hero's journey, that Joseph Campbell wrote so wonderfully about in his book, The Hero's Journey. In fact, Star Wars was based on that book. And so superheroes kind of have that, they're kind of born and they have these two sides to them, and they battle, with their own inner demons, as it were. And they go on this hero's journey to find out what it is that they need to become whole or to maximize who they are. And then they kind of give back to, society in a way that's most appropriate to their strengths. And so I suppose Superhero Your Life is all about, really being able to, clearly identify, who you are, what your strengths are, how to best maximize those, but also, like you again have identified, how to model the skills of extraordinary people, and I suppose upskill yourself so that you can kind of superhero your body, superhero your brain. I'm even a big fan of superheroing your home. Your home environment is so important. So why wouldn't you want to model out, extraordinary distinctions in home environments that would kind of uplift, inspire, and allow you to become even more? So it's going to be a real fun workshop. We're really going to go there and really discuss in real world terms, what it actually takes to become, extraordinary in kind of mind, body, and environment.
That sounds really good. And in your talk, one of the topics you'll be covering is the area of state. And could you give an example an overview of what you mean by that, and why it's important for individuals to get a grasp of the area of state?
Yeah, NLP, we're big fans of what we call state management, and possibly the easiest way to understand it is using a very simple kind of sentence, which is people tend to make good decisions when they're feeling good, and people tend to make shitty decisions when they're feeling shitty. Yes? So you kind of always want to kind of get into the appropriate state that's required to generate the behavior that you want to generate. And then being able to have state control and get into the appropriate state is an incredibly important thing to do. But also being able to change your state very rapidly is very important as well. And, it's kind of, genuinely today I got an email through from a lady who did a lot of work and study with me. And she went on to work in the oncology departments of private hospitals. So working with cancer patients in private hospitals and being able to work in the areas of grief and death and, the hard end of the stick, And she uses kind of NLP in this area. And she wrote me a lovely kind of little email just thanking me that, due to the state control that she had developed, she could move from, giving a lecture, obtaining pain relief, kind of via your unconscious mind to, spending time, in the room with people who have just lost their loved ones, and then going back into, home life without taking it with her, and being able to be a fully functional kind of member of the home environment without any of those energies interfering with that.
Okay.
And so that's a very kind of practical and I think a very a nice example of the power of state management. Too many people muddy the different areas of their life by bringing kind of energies or states or mindsets, and polluting areas that don't need to be polluted, as it were. Yeah. And state management allows you to keep these kind of boundaries around your experience. But like I said at the beginning, it also allows you to be able to generate the appropriate behavior.
And do you think it's important for managers as well to get a hold of state? Because in a way, people's mood gets influenced by others. So if a manager, when you have a challenging situation at work, can't control their own state, that's going to get influence. That's going to influence the people around them, maybe their team around them, or the business as a whole.
Absolutely, and it's something that I think is. I don't really like to use the word unfair because what it is, but it is to a certain degree unfair on the people below. Why should your day be ruined by the by the emotional instability of someone who's getting paid more than you? I think we do have a responsibility, to manage our states, and not put our states upon other people. And I can't remember who said it or who I kind of had the chat with, but I remember one person saying how annoyed they were that every time you got into a kind of like a social environment or something, the person with the shittiest mood would tend to, everyone would kind of like subjugate themselves to that person. It's like, oh, are you okay? You're okay. And he's like, well, screw that. I'm in a good mood. Why don't you raise yourself to my mood? Why do I always have to lower my mood to yours? And I think that's a valid point. So I think to be able to, obviously we need to be compassionate and understanding of people who are going through, tough times. I get that. But I also believe that our own state can be a source of inspiration and, for other people to kind of raise themselves to that.
So this is an NLP orientated conference, but you have also studied a number of other disciplines as well. What would you say are some good additions to your use of NLP? And for an individual, what would they find useful within their own life and in business?
Yeah. I think that NLP, I've often defined NLP. I'm not like a lot of people. NLP, like I said, I'm profoundly grateful for NLP, but I don't classify myself as, hi, I'm Alistair, an NLPer. Yes, it's a part of what I do and an extraordinary part of what I do. But, I'm a philosopher by trade. That was my my degree, was philosophy. So I think that people, we tend to have a tendency now to enjoy too many self-help books, which I'm not a fan of, because I don't think the wisdom or the information in most self-help books is rich enough or deep enough to be able to deliver the results that people want. So I'm much more a fan of people going back to kind of the origins of the real meat of wisdom. And you're much better off studying Plato and Socrates, and you're much better off studying people like Joseph Campbell, like I said, or Clarissa Pinkola Estes, who wrote Women Who Run with the Wolves, or Robert Bly, who wrote Iron John. And these are extraordinary books, on philosophy and metaphor and life. And I think that there's a rich depth to this kind of classical. Some of the things I've mentioned aren't classical, but some of these classical works that, when put through the modern knowledge of kind of neuroscience and NLP, will give people a far greater, experience of what it really means to live an optimal life and to be able to achieve that. So I certainly think that, pop culture's fun, great. I like a cheeseburger as much as everyone else does, but
get a steak once in a while.
Yeah, get a steak once in a while, mate. Yeah, really. Take the time, because even the language of structures of these of the classics, they expand your brain in a way that I don't think pop psychology can. And so exactly as you're saying, make sure you eat a steak once in a while.
Do you think that some of the modern day literature towards self-help has been very much diluted, and that's and in a way that kind of reflects how we take it on board? So if we go back to the food metaphor, if we become accustomed to a hamburger, that's how we're gonna expect food. Where if we're always expecting steak, that's how we'll live with that expectation. Do you think that's the case with the modern day self-help literature?
I think so, mate. I think we can really further our food analogy here, but it's like when I was young, I was basically an athlete. I just but I was a typical boy, so I just ate everything. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
my knowledge around food wasn't particularly great, and I always had terrible digestive problems, and you know what I mean, and just consumed vast amounts of pasta, bread, cheese, anything. You know what I mean? Just And then obviously the last however many years, you start understanding the concept of nutritional density. And you're eating foods that are nutrient dense, and still to this day, I hardly, compared to what I hardly eat anything, but what I do eat really is incredibly nutrient dense. And so it is a good analogy. I mean, you can read 100 self-help books, and yeah, sure, it's all good, but you get bloated on it, and you get bored with it. And, you're not nourished with it, And then you can read one extraordinary text, and its nutrient density is enough to sustain you for a significant period of time. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, continuing on the theme of metaphors and reaching the end of the interview, this interview is for Fridge Magazine, and the reason why it's called a fridge is because it's the idea that the fridge is a place where we tend to keep our main ingredients for an amazing meal. So based on your experience and working with people, if you could have something in your business fridge in order to be an amazing business person, what would that be?
That's an easy one for me. That would be a bottle of intensity.
Nice.
I think that intensity is, I've been very fortunate. I've coached the wealthiest people in the world, the most successful athletes in the world. I've coached, top CEOs. I've been very fortunate, in the things that I've done. And of course, even though they pay me, I'm spending a lot of my time modeling out what they do at the same time. Yes, so I get paid and the added bonus of a learning experience. And I would say the common denominator was every person who I have seen who has been extraordinary has had the capacity to work at very high levels of intensity for durations of time. And if you're going to bother doing something, then do it with intensity. If you're going to sit down and do an hour's work, then just do an hour's work. And if you do it with intensity and real focus, you can get more done in an hour than most people get done in a week. Yes.
Yeah.
The same is true with your body. I always laugh. You go to the gym, and there's these people plodding along for an hour, looking, not particularly happy. And you go in there, and if you hit it as hard as you possibly can for 20 minutes, you will get results that far outshine most people's hour or two in the gym.
Definitely.
So I think, intensity. Learn, practice, and develop, and encourage yourself to do things, with intensity, and then you have more time off, more time for yourself and family, and then you can have more time for that kind of downtime. So that would be my magic ingredient.
Absolutely, that was brilliant. Well, thanks a lot for your time, Alistair. I hope that you have a great time at the Superfest, and sounds like you'll be sharing a lot as well.
Yeah. Thanks so much to you, Aaron, and Fridge Magazine. Really appreciate it, and lovely to have had the chat.
Brilliant. Well, thanks for your time.
All the best. Take care.
Thank you for listening to this podcast, brought to you by NLP Superfest and Fridge Magazine. You can find more information about NLP Superfest over at nlpsuperfest.com. And if you're in Australia between the 3rd and 5th of October 2014, why not head over to Melbourne and come and join the Superfest. However, if you can't make it, don't despair. Head over to NLP Superfest online and find out how you can get involved. You can also find out more information about Aaron Morton at fridgemagazine.com or on his own personal website at theconfidencelounge.com. See you at NLP Superfest, and we look forward to talking more NLP soon.